welcome to Press Party here at Suffolk University's Studio 73. I'm your host, Katie Eastman. Hundreds of thousands of people in West Virginia couldn't drink or even touch their water for almost a week, but this chemical spill didn't get the news coverage it deserved. It's the political scandal of the year, a traffic backup for miles caused by the Christie administration. The media has gone nuts, and there's a fine line between describing a suspect and just being racist. In our media fail of the week, one newspaper clearly went over that line. Now let's meet our panel. The chair of communications of journalism here at Suffolk University is Dr. Bob Rosenthal, and we have Adriana Cohen joining us. She is from Boston Herald Radio's Trending Now, and Boston City Councilor Tito Jackson joins us once again. Water, water everywhere, but not a drop to drink. This is still West Virginia after a storage facility leaked several thousand gallons of coal processing chemical into a water treatment facility. Erica Mora has more on the national media's underwhelming response.
The chemical leak is unacceptable.
A chemical leak left 300,000 in West Virginia without water.
Do not use tap water for drinking, bathing, cooking, or cleaning.
Restaurants and businesses were forced to close. The ban lasted for days.
That's not that big a story, right? I mean,
networks surely didn't think so. Not one of the Sunday news magazine programs ever really talked about it. But when a Carnival cruise ship was forced to evacuate 3,000 people, CNN dedicated over 700 minutes of coverage. Meanwhile, residents were flocking to designated sites to pick up bottled water and wrapping bags around faucets.
Freedom Industries is exempt from DEP inspections and permitting since it stores chemicals and doesn't produce them.
That fact was reported by the Associated Press. This seems like a really big deal, and as usual, press conference revealed little information.
Look guys, it has been an extremely long day. I'm having a hard trouble talking.
Don't worry, the president of the company responsible for the leak didn't get away so easily.
Hey, no, we're not done.
You're not done.
We're not done.
A WCHS reporter refused to let him end the presser so quickly. She still didn't get any concrete answers, but hey, she tried. Finally, someone was after the truth. For Press Party, I'm Erica Mora.
Dr. Bob, 300,000 people without water, and all we were hearing about was Christie. Is there a problem here?
Yes, there is, because it's the priority here. The problem is, of course, is Christie is a larger-than-life figure who's in the mix of the presidential race for the future. And West Virginia, unfortunately, is a small media market. Now, that doesn't make it right, but I think it's primarily a business decision that was driving the coverage rather than a news decision. 300,000 people without water is a major national news story, should have had more coverage.
We can call it, I know we have another section that's called media fail. It's an absolute fail for the media not to cover 300,000 folks. I've actually had people contact me from that area.
Really?
And it's, yeah, I have some friends who are down in that area. And you know, it's unfortunate that we're not paying attention to a state because it doesn't have as many electoral votes or something of that sort. I think we definitely need to have media that deals with the real issues that are going on for real people, especially in places like West Virginia.
And you say electoral votes, but why should the media think about that? I mean, we give a voice to the voiceless. That's the whole point, right?
I agree. It's such an important story. So many lives were affected. Over 300,000 people in 9 counties didn't have safe tap water. The media absolutely should have covered that and rallied the public, the nation's support. I know a lot of people in the private sector, in the bottled water industry, donated a lot of bottled water, which was great, but there's more we should have known about their plight and how we can prevent tragedies like this happening in the future.
Right, and look at the video that could have been riveting. The guy who was the head of the company who had the leak, he sounded as terrible about this and as off the cuff about this as the guy from BP. Right? I mean, it had a ready-made enemy, if you will, a physical person who represented the company.
All of the elements of a great story are there. We want to cover this. Heck, I'm ready to head to West Virginia myself.
Sure.
This is a fantastic story to cover and to look deeper into. Even though they're starting to get their water back now, we still need to know why something like this could happen, why this wasn't monitored.
Right.
I mean,
and infrastructure for a significant number of people being at jeopardy. And also, you know, do we have a regulatory issue relative to what's going on? And on top of it, he shouldn't drink water while he's speaking.
Right.
Right? That's
Taking
just
a swig.
insult to injury.
All of those people still couldn't get bottled water because the
Right.
prices went sky high. And West Virginia is interesting because you have people up on the hill with $1 million homes. They had no problem getting water. They bought all the bottled water they could need. But then the people who are actually working for the coal mining industry, they're the ones that can't afford to buy all that bottled water.
It's a shame, and I live in Concord, Massachusetts, which is the only town in America that banned bottled water, and I've been against it because emergencies happen like this, and where the public relies on bottled water, you need it in an emergency. And what happened in West Virginia is bottled water quickly sold out. People were scrambling for it. They couldn't find it, and so that was a big problem. It's very scary for a lot of people, and so
but we shouldn't have to worry about that. I think
Exactly.
that is something that we need to have more long-term stories devoted to looking at our water purification system, looking
Right.
at how something like this can happen in the United States, where you don't think that water can be such a huge problem.
And we're talking about terrorism and things of
That's
that sort.
right.
Right.
If we can't get our public infrastructure together, and if we don't have a regulatory environment that protects public infrastructure, a lot of those other things are, to me, not necessarily at the same priority. We have to have that same level of urgency, and also on top of it, that's an area that could be attacked also.
Absolutely,
relative
by
to-
terrorists. Terrorists could pollute or purposely contaminate our water supply, so that needs to be monitored and regulated, like Tito said. We need much more oversight on our water site, because that is one of the most important commodities that humans need to survive.
And part of the problem is that the infrastructure is antiquated. I used to consult in this industry, and there were pipes in Boston, for example, that are serving the public that are more than 100 years old.
Right.
During the Big Dig, they unearthed a pump that was still in operation that the Smithsonian wanted to put in the Smithsonian Museum of Science and Industry.
Oh, no.
We'll take
We
it.
were still using it in Boston.
Sorry, we
It
can't
was
give it to you.
When we're done, give about 10
Yeah.
more years.
Yeah,
We'll do
it is,
this.
but this is, you know how we have water main break? Those are going to continue to happen because
Right.
we haven't reinvested in infrastructure. So the key is, this story has so many sidebars where you can
Right,
go:
it does.
government regulation, infrastructure, and this is water. This is the basic stuff of life. It should have been covered.
Absolutely, and then also we need to talk about emergency preparedness, because during Hurricane Sandy, the tap water got polluted in certain communities in both New York and New Jersey, and FEMA had stated that, oh, we'll have enough water to take care of you in emergency, and it turns out they fell short.
Right.
And then the private sector
they
had
usually
to
do, yeah.
help out, and so we also need to look at that too, is FEMA and Red Cross and all our agencies that help in emergencies, are they fully prepared? Because like we had the Boston Marathon bombing, there's hurricanes, there's all these natural disasters, water mains break, they leak, so we need to prepare to protect the citizenship.
All right, well, thank you guys so much, and I think we can all agree that a lot of these issues need to come to light by the media covering them. Thanks to everyone on our panel. Up next, Christie blankets the news. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Press Party. I'm your host, Katie Eastman. You couldn't turn on the TV without seeing the New Jersey governor's face this week. Joe Battenfeld tells us just how much news on this latest political scandal there was.
It's the ultimate media feeding frenzy. A portly politician with presidential aspirations
I am embarrassed and humiliated.
makes a televised apology caught in a scandal with a catchy name
Bridgegate is blown up.
and damning emails from high-level aides.
Time for some traffic problems in Fort Lee.
But is Bridgegate really another Watergate? Will New Jersey Governor Chris Christie be blamed for helping kill an elderly woman caught in traffic?
In politics, she, when we have her name, is going to become the Willie Horton of Chris Christie's presidential campaign.
As Christie might say, don't be stupid.
One was Willie Horton.
Unlike Willie Horton, the furloughed killer who torched Michael Dukakis' White House campaign, Bridgegate didn't kill an old woman, and it's unclear whether Christie's even been hurt much. His popularity is still high, and a Pew poll shows only 18% of voters are even paying much attention to the scandal. For Press Party, this is Joe Battenfeld.
All right, so Bridgegate, we all know what this is. What is the obsession with the media? Why have there been countless hours?
Well, it's because Governor Christie is expected to be the front runner in the 2016 elections, and in fact, prior to Bridgegate, CNN did a poll, and he was actually coming in higher than Hillary Clinton. So he is definitely perceived as a threat to the Democrat Party. They had a huge interest in the story, the mainstream media. And it worked. They've covered this extensively, and his poll numbers are now down. So Hillary Clinton is now leading.
I also think he seemed like a really pragmatic person. I think when
I don't think people expected this to come from the Christie administration.
Yeah, right. So when I think when Sandy happened and he reached across the aisle, proverbial aisle at that point, to just do what was right for people, there seemed to be a pragmatism that was kind of in his aura, and now it seems kind of the same old that if you don't go with us, then we're going to shut something down, and it's the worst of what we want to see in government, and that means it is the best of things for the media.
Right.
Right, and with the you've got also not only the Democrats, but the conservative wing of the Republican Party, the Rand Paul wing, is loving this also. And remember, from a media perspective, not only is Christie this larger-than-life national figure running for president, we think, but also it's the New York, New Jersey, Southern Connecticut media market. And that New York media market is, that's the largest in the country.
I'm sure some reporters were stuck in that traffic jam.
Oh,
and so they're thinking, oh, yes, personal angle to it.
And it's unacceptable for Governor Christie's staff to do this. It was a blatant abuse of power, and it's a misuse of our trust, and it's wrong. I mean, we've all been stuck in traffic. It's horrendous. You diminish your productivity. It's uncomfortable. It's bad. It should never have happened. However, this story got so much more coverage than, let's say, the IRS scandal, where the government allegedly targeted conservative groups. And so what I'd like to
see... We know that they did this. Exactly. There is just... It's so clear, and I think it was easier of a story to tell.
The IRS targeted conservative groups, Tea Party groups in particular, and that story only got a small fraction of the media coverage that it deserved. In fact, the Media Research Center that tracks what media is covering nationally said that in the first 24 hours of the Chris Christie scandal, when that broke, that got 17 times more coverage than 6 months worth of coverage on the IRS scandal.
But the difference there is that this is a person. It's an individual, and it tracks back. If whatever your administration does, it's one thing. If it's an organization, and none of us actually like the IRS, and all of us feel targeted by the IRS. So that's like not a surprise that, and they target me every April 15th. But I think in this regard, I think he tried though. So he did a really smart thing from the media perspective. Was a press conference 109 minutes?
Right, that's like a
so
filibuster.
He answered I'm going to stay here until absolutely everybody is done. Someone cleaning up. Do you have a question? And so he tried to kind of suck all the air out of the room and do what was needed to do.
Which led to him being on TV for so long and to all of the stories.
Right, and the poll results actually indicate that there's very little damage so far, particularly among Republican voters who are the ones that he has to impress to get through the primary. I mean, it's very, and even among Democrats, there's really not that much of a slide in terms of his overall image. So at least for now, he's weathering the story. Now, the key is going to be is if there's a smoking gun collecting him to saying something like, we need to get this. We need to do something.
Like, I think he can survive this,
if
provided
the aide
he
comes
wasn't
out
involved.
and talks about something.
But if he gets implicated, whether it's an email or there's proof surfaces that he was involved in this, then I think he's political toast.
Then it'll be an even bigger story.
And I also think that what he's trying to do is the exact opposite of what Target did. Right? So Target 70 now was 10 million, 15 people.
I got an email from them this morning.
40 million, and then there's 70 million, right? And so trying to get all of the information out at one time with all of the media in the room.
Rather than the slow trickle.
Right.
And that's all the time we have, but keep the conversation going on BostonHerald.com. Up next, describing suspects gets tricky when you don't know what they look like, but is naming the person's race going to help or hurt getting answers? Stay tuned. Welcome back to Press Party. I'm your host, Katie Eastman. This week's media fail goes to a newspaper in West Virginia that could be a little more specific when talking about crime suspects. The Dominion Post printed this description of a person wanted for suspicious activity. They didn't say exactly what the person was wanted for, only that he is described as a black man. That description matches, well, every black male. The explanation was retracted and more details were given in the next day's paper, but that still was there for a day. And what do you think people thought when they read that? Just suddenly look around.
Well, yeah, I see, officer, there's someone near me. Again, this issue of profiling, well, first off, this is racist. This is an issue of profiling, and oftentimes more attention is paid to black men and Latino men who participate in crimes. Also, when we look at what happens in newspapers, the sizes of pictures, and oftentimes the difference between a picture being associated with a story. You oftentimes, and there's been studies that show that African American and Latino men appear more often as suspects. And so I think there's a lot that newspapers and media needs to do to clean that up. So by the way, black people make up 12% of the country, and so about half of them are males. So we're talking about 6% of the population, and so we shouldn't always be the one in that picture. There's a whole 94% of people that may need a picture if they do something wrong.
Right. And now clearly this was wrong, but I think there are a lot of gray areas when we're talking about descriptions of suspects. When do you describe a suspect? Their descriptions are usually tough. They're not. Right. You never know exactly what someone looks like. Is there a?
Well, you don't describe it in a headline, and I think that's the biggest problem. What happens is there's suspicious behavior in the story. If the police are saying we are looking for a white male, 5'10", 180 pounds, last seen wearing a dark leather jacket, or a black male, 5'10", that's a legitimate description, because then that's legitimate police information germane to the investigation. You don't put that stuff in a headline, because in a headline, it's pithy, it's shorter, and it leads to prejudicial statements.
But even if that wasn't in a headline, I mean, obviously that wasn't a description at all. It's just saying a black male. But are there a certain amount of descriptors that can show you that will actually lead to someone? Even saying a 5'10" black male or a 5'10" white male or a female, that still doesn't sound like you're going to actually lead to something.
But you have to go on something. So basically you have to do it the eyewitness account, or if there's video cameras at the scene of a crime, you just have to pull every single bit of information that you can. And where this was a media fail was they should have described the suspect, exactly the height, the weight, the clothing. Do they have any
the authorities
facial?
Gave this to the media, so that was all they had, and they just chose to run that.
And there's, I mean, it's just too broad a description, and I agree with you, Tito. It's wrong, because think about all the innocent black men that are now considered suspects. It's just wrong. And so they should never run with this story. They needed more detailed information about the look or what even the suspect's wearing.
I also think we have to be consistent. And so if we're saying, first off, I don't think it's wrong to say someone's black or white in the description. But when it comes down to it, we can't do it more often. And we can't have the APBs that are put out on black men pushed out more. One of the things that we also have been looking at are disparities in missing children, right? So if we call you missing versus a runaway, then
are more black children considered runaways and more white children are missing?
And so then there's a feeling about how hard you're going to look for somebody if they're a runaway. Versus missing, and one of the things that this yesterday was the day that actually at the council we commemorated Human Trafficking Day or month, and one of the things that we're finding is that African American and Latina girls are not searched for with the same kind of visceral.
And that comes from the media. Because it all starts with how much we are putting it out there. And if we're only putting out the white blonde girls.
Right. Well, and
that's
in that
awful.
particular instance, the connotation between a missing child and a runaway child about the family structure.
Yeah.
You know, in one instance, you assume the family's concerned, the child is missing. In the other instance, you assume the child is running away from the family, maybe something's wrong,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
In that instance. And so that's why we should always frame that as a missing child situation.
I agree with
So
that.
back to this, one news station in Florida, a local station, they put out a set of crime guidelines this week. And one of their crime guidelines said, we will never use race as a sole identifier for a crime suspect, which it should never be a sole identifier.
Right.
And I think most news organizations adhere to that standard as well. And they will only release a description if authorities give them one. They will never say, from hearsay, someone that we talked to said he was a black man. And I think that's something where, when it's not an official description, that can get very muddy too.
Yeah, to bring up some history, remember the whole Carol DeMotte Stewart thing here, where her husband almost tried to get away with murder by blaming an African-American male who was supposedly
and he was wrongly charged, and that started that stop and frisk all over Mission Hill.
And
for those
this person, Willie Bennett, still has a lot of issues, and that name is something that kind of goes along with it. And I actually was stopped several times, at that point, and it was stop and search. They made you drop your pants, and that's
really?
the level of
And that
dehumanization.
was not too long. That was the 80s.
90s.
That was the 90s. Oh my gosh, and that makes you
Now,
cringe even more.
and Carol DeMotte Stewart was a graduate of Suffolk Law School, by the way. We have a scholarship in her name at the law school now, et cetera, with the family. But the interesting thing about that entire case is afterwards, the media beat itself up when we finally realized that we were, aiding and abetting, right?
Totally played.
Exactly,
by that.
totally played. And for a while, things improved. Sometimes not so much.
Well, and they aided and abetted further division in the city of Boston. And as a black man who grew up in that time, such a difficult time. And then also the relationship with the police department, right? So if you're fanning those flames, that adversarial relationship with the police department at that time, that we've had to work really hard to continue to build a stronger relationship and to put it back together.
And the evidence of that is the improvement under the appointments of the new Mayor Walsh.
And yes, and so we have a new Commissioner Evans, and we have the first black superintendent in chief who actually runs the police department, Willie Gross, and he's a great guy.
Yeah, that's what
So
I
I think what Tito said earlier was very important, that we need to have uniform standards. How you describe a white male suspect needs to be the same for every other ethnicity.
Right.
We can't have two sets of standards, and then also we can't have two sets of standards when a child's missing, whether they're a runaway or whether they're described as missing. There needs some uniformity too, because every child matters, and until they nobody knows why this kid is missing or a runaway. Those facts will come later. The most important thing is let's get them home, let's get them safe.
Right.
And finally, and just in addition to that, the number and size of pictures that you put in a paper matters.
I agree.
And so,
that is an ethical decision as much as what you're writing is an ethical decision.
I agree.
And where
That
it
needs to be
occurs.
uniform also, so everybody gets this size, the suspect.
If only it were that easy to tell everyone you had these rules.
I mean, but it's just common sense and common fairness. We have to treat people equally, and so you made a really good point. I never even thought about the picture, that editorial discretion that all the papers have to decide how big a photo should be on a suspect.
Right. All right, well, that's all the time we have. Thanks once again to our panel and to you for watching. For Press Party and Suffolk University, I'm Katie Eastman. We'll see you next week.